What a day. Coming up here.
Hold this.
All I want to do is, go to a Sox game.
Yeah. Cocktail?
A cocktail. Thank you all for coming. This is really the last appearance I have on what is a very short promotional spin for my book. I got to go back to work on this job that I have normally, and the writing the book was it was a real experience because I was working at the same time, and the first year that I was under contract to write the book, I wrote nothing. I thought about it a lot. I wrote a lot of notes, actually, and I had a lot of conversations with people. We taped a lot of interviews with people. We transcribed those things, but I didn't really write anything in terms of pages or outlines for the book until 1 year into it. And then I really stepped on the gas a little bit in the spring of last year, and we wrote the book. My writing partner, Mark Tabb, and I am sorry he's not here. Mark, who's one of the greatest guys I've ever met, married to his wife, has 3 beautiful children, lives in Knightstown, Indiana, for people who are older, where they shot the movie Hoosiers with Gene Hackman. And Mark, who I met through my brother Stephen, who wrote a book. Mark is a former evangelical minister who now is a pastor in a church in his hometown. And he and my brother wrote my brother Stephen's books, his books about his journey and his life. But I had a very, I think it goes without saying, I had a very tough time inside divorce courtrooms in Los Angeles, and it was really very draining. I was someone who there was never any question about my love of my child or my parenting skills before I got in a room with a lot of high-priced lawyers. I was married to a woman who used to turn to me and say things to me like, "I'm so glad you're her father." And then all that got turned up on its ear once I got out of it, and once I was divorced. She seemed to change her mind about that, shall we say. And it led to something that was, I can make light of it, because that's just easier to do with a bunch of people that I don't know well, but privately, and as the book is the chance for me to tell people really how tough this was. It was really tough. It was really tough. It's like, as I say, there's an instinct that most people have, men and women. We tend to think that men and women approach parenting differently, have different roles in parenting, and they do. A mother is a mother, there's no denying that, and only men who are fools deny the fact that motherhood is such a powerful thing in the first several years of a child's life. But as a child grows up, they want to include both their parents in terms of understanding their identity. As a child gets older, as a child is young from birth to through infancy to when it goes to school, they need their mothers. But as they get older, they need their mothers less and want both their parents more. It's less about need than want. We turn our children over to society to raise them, to schools and so forth, and churches and organizations, and we spend less of our time with our children. And children, I think at that point, need relationships with both their parents. I joke when I say this, but I mean it seriously. God designed it where children would have 2 parents, normally, typically. They don't have 3 parents because that would be more opinions than one person could bear, quite frankly. But you have 2 people and you have 2 points of view, some of which hopefully both parents share. That's why they got together in the first place, because they had some common view of the world. And I think that children need to know both their parents. I think that the courts and the system we have now are a system that abuse a very fundamental rule for both men and women, because not only men are the victims of parental alienation, men and women are the victims of this inside this system. A growing number of men are winning primary custody, if not sole custody, of their children. A growing number of men are learning how to play this game that is played in American courtrooms. And I think that, as I've said before, you have your typical man or woman in our society. You say to them that your child is on the other side of a 10-foot concrete wall, and you can have them if you can get to them. Most people would start chewing their way through that wall to access their child. Most men and women, they'd start chewing. if they had no other means of getting through there. And the courts know this. The courts abuse that and take advantage of it. They know that you're going to do whatever it takes to access your child. Normal, healthy people. Many men walk away from their responsibilities in divorce, and some women too. But the system is a bad system. It's a system designed to line the pockets of a bunch of avaricious people and corrupt, ignorant judges, cowardly judges. The judges are the worst cowards you've ever met in your lifetime. You've never met a bigger coward than a family law judge in Los Angeles, trust me, who just stand by and watch all this inequity go on, and they can stop it. They have the power to stop it. They do nothing. They do nothing. They just let the lawyers run the show. It's tough. I just came from Harvard Law School, where a woman who was a friend of mine and a contributor to my book, Professor Jeannie Suk from Harvard Law School, who's here with me somewhere. Jeannie was kind enough to let me come to Harvard again to speak to her students. And I said to them, not all lawyers are bad. I mean, what's better for our society than a good lawyer? What's better for our society than people who know the law and study hard? It's a lot to learn. And they get these law degrees and they go out into the world to really help people, to help people navigate those waters of the legal system, which is very convoluted. And there's nothing more important in our society than a good lawyer. But it seems that in the family law system, it's really, really rampant, this problem. I wish I had had more time to write a more lengthy book, a more comprehensive book that could help people. I mean, I have advice in there for people about how you get divorced and what you should avoid and what you should do. And I had a woman who's a family therapist in San Francisco earlier this week. I was at a book program there at the Commonwealth Club, and the woman was a family therapist and a local radio host, I believe, or television host. And she said to me, you put a tremendous amount of emphasis on helping people have a more fair and more collaborative divorce. She said, I'd like to see society design programs and counseling models to help people stay married. And I said, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I mean, I'm all in favor of marriage. Don't think from this book that I think that marriage is some a sucker's game. I think marriage is great. And when marriage works, it's great. I wish I could find somebody to marry right now. That would be heaven. But you know what I mean? That's another natural inclination people have. I mean, you want to find somebody you can share your life with. That's great. But I think that we need to be realistic that in a complex society, in a society where women have more independence, and it's a good thing, where women have the ability to go out and they can take care of themselves now and get jobs and make money, and where society doesn't frown on a woman who isn't married and having children. More and more, a woman sits there and says, I don't think I want to have kids. People in our society go, okay, I get it. That's your choice. Live and let live. We have become more of a live and let live attitude in our society now than we've ever had. And more women say, I really don't want to have a kid. We don't judge those women now. 20, 30 years ago, you didn't want to get married and have kids. People were like, what's the matter with Debbie?
Hey.
So is your name Debbie? I apologize. What's the matter with Helen? Anyone? I'm going to finish now, but it's a complicated situation. More and more people are choosing not to get married, and those people who are getting married, more and more people of those marriages are failing, and people are finding it not only easier but more acceptable to live alone or to just cohabitate with people in a relationship outside of some legal bond that you create. That's cool. What I'm saying is that but when you get married, that's a legal contract. That's a legal procedure that puts you in the grips of a legal system. Puts you in the grips of the family law system. And the family law system is a bad system in a lot of states in this country. In California, it's a travesty. It's a travesty. And if you have no money, I would go into court and you walk into the docket and one guy's a gardener and his wife is a housekeeper, and those people were in and out of there in 10 minutes. They don't have the money for high conflict divorce. People who are middle class people, they sit there and say, a friend of mine who was my partner in my company, married to his high school sweetheart, married for 12 years, 2 kids, they got divorced, and the judge just looked at him like, well, everybody knows you got to sell your house. Everybody knows that's just what you do. You sell your house and you split the assets to pay off your divorce lawyers, and she gets half and you get half. You both go get condos, and the kids move out of the nice school district you lived in now, and you're going to struggle to get a condo that you can afford in a school district that's decent for your kids. Or your kids went to private school. Well, that's over now, I guess. The impact that all this, I mean, the cost is significant in some people's lives. And it's even more tragic with a class of people where the cost is not significant in their lives to one degree. They've got all the money in the world to fuel high conflict custody proceedings. And they spend millions of dollars, and the judges just sit back and go, let it roll, baby. And the lawyers have come up with 1,000 ways to get you to keep rolling those dice, in gambling. I say in the book that California family law judges are like pit bosses in Vegas casinos. The job is to keep the gamers at the table and keep them gaming. They don't want you to leave the casino. And but there is hope. There are very smart, caring, wise, open-minded men and women working in the system in states like West Virginia, where they have a really, really good proposal for a shared parenting ratio based on what the parenting ratio was during the marriage. And they have, in New Hampshire, they got good law that was passed in Kansas about parental alienation and or the potential for that. And there's been a lot of talk, and this is the last thing I'll say, there's been a lot of talk from feminist groups who are opposed to parental alienation syndrome. And I was at an event in New York where people from an organization came and picketed my appearance there on behalf of a women's group. And I want to say to them that the shared parenting groups I work with, which are not gender specific, it's not a father's rights group. It's a shared parenting group that encompasses both men and women who've suffered from alienation inside of a courtroom. Those people, they support. I mean, these people from this one group gave me a flyer, and everything that they said on their flyer I agreed with. That men who are abusive and who hide behind charges of parental alienation in order to avoid responsibility for their abusive behavior, that's wrong. Those men should go to jail. Those men should definitely their abuse should be determinative of their child custody. Men who abuse women or children in whatever way, men who abandon pregnant women, men who don't meet their financial responsibilities that are court-ordered to their spouses, those men are the enemy of the shared parenting movement. But one thing I didn't see on that piece of paper was the admission by women's rights groups that there are women similarly who go to court and lie and make charges of abuse against men. And you want to know who the most vocal critics of this are? The woman who loves the alienated man now. You've never seen people become more angry than the woman that loves the alienated father now, his current wife, his current girlfriend, his sister, his mother. I'd be with a guy and he had that really stooped over, it was unmistakable, his demeanor. He was kind of hunched over, completely hollowed out. He'd aged 10 years in the last 2 years. He was in and out of custody evaluations in courtrooms with judges, and he was really, really demoralized. He just was so beaten. He was so savagely beaten emotionally by this experience. And he'd be with his new wife. And I'd be with the guy and I'd say to him, so you had a tough time, huh, Bob? He'd go, yeah. Very quiet. We didn't want to talk about it. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. My kids, I don't get to see my kids, And I'll go, and you don't have any communication with you don't have any kind of open channel of communication with the ex-wife. And his current wife or girlfriend would just turn to me and go, she's a bitch! And I go, hell hath no fury like the woman who loves the alienated man now. It's mind-blowing. This is not an issue that is a men's issue. This is a national issue because we all know someone who's been affected by divorce. You're a child of divorce, you're getting divorced, you have friends, family who are getting divorced, your brothers and sisters. We all have people who are going to work who we do not have their full participation in the work they're doing because they're struggling in some kind of divorce proceeding. Divorce has to be made simpler. Divorce has to be made simpler in our society, and it's not. People are forced to pay and pay and pay and pay. In divorce and the allocation of custody, where there are no determinative problems or issues of abuse or neglect, where there are no determinative issues of abuse or neglect, child custody has to be modified as well in our society. A growing number of men want to have more meaningful contact with their children. There are still men who get divorced and they go off and they really don't want to have that much time with their kids. They often go and marry somebody else and write off their entire family. There's a lot of men who don't do that, and a growing number of men don't do that, and a growing number of men want access to their children, and they want meaningful custody of their children. And those who deserve it should have it. And there are women similarly who are alienated like this. I was saying in in another event we went to, and I've said this repeatedly, one of the most classic ways that women are alienated in court is through drug and alcohol abuse charges. I mean, I have many, many women in my life I've worked with during this book who they were former drug addicts or alcoholics who got help. But once you are stigmatized a certain way, see, the courts are state-run systems, so they must make things easy for themselves. Man, abuser, woman, junkie. And it's very hard for you to wash that scarlet letter off of yourself in the courtroom during those processes. I have one woman, she's been clean and sober for 6 or 7 years, and she still has a really, really crappy visitation with her kids because her husband's got a lot of money and he goes into court and he just buries her all the time. You know, he's coached the children. Well, we don't really feel safe with mommy, because of the thing that she did, and when the children themselves become litigants, I mean, one of the most horrible things that happens is the empowerment of the child in the courtroom process. Once your child goes in and says the things that the alienating parent needs them to say, you're screwed. You are screwed. And you can almost never come out from under that. Because the child who's involved in the alienation matrix will do what they need to do to protect themselves, and they'll hope that the alienated parent understands. An alienated child lives with the custodial parent, the alienating parent, and their attitude toward the targeted parent is, this is the best I can do, you're going to need to understand. I got to live with this person, man or woman. And they live with them and they endure what they endure and they hope you understand. And alienated parents are told all the time, well, when they turn out to be 22 or 23, my son was 25 years old and he figured it all out and came back to me. And I thought, 25? My daughter's about to turn 13. I got to wait another 12 years before I'm going to have any meaningful relationship with my child? Why didn't the family law system do something to stop that? That's wrong.
They make too much money.
Well, that goes without saying. Thank you, Debbie. Anyway, I just want to say thank you all for coming, and we're going to sign some books now.
Thank you.